This is part 3 of the Leo's Disco Lights series, and in this version we've made it so that when the lights are flashing, they flash in random colors like this. So I've got the camera sensitivity turned right down so you can see the colors. And so you can see that now they flash not just in the same color as before, but in random colors. For this project you're going to need one JackBord that's charged up, a top, a JackBord light stick, one M4 nut and bolt, one 20cm female jumper wire, and 9 10cm female jumper wires. For the construction, basically the steps are the same as for the first video. The primary difference being that we're adding the variable resistor. So I'm just going to take these wires out and I'll do it again so that we can see how it works. So basically pin 3 on the variable resistor, which is on the left hand side, goes to ground on port A. Then pin 2 of the variable resistor goes to pin A2 on port A, like that. And finally we need to get some power to the variable resistor, and in this case it's 3 volts. So we go from pin 1 on the variable resistor goes to the 3 volt line on the JackBord right here. So essentially we've got the variable resistor number 1 connected to port A. Other than that, the rest of the construction is exactly the same as the first video. Check your connections against the pictures that are coming up now, and just make sure that the jumpers are going into the right pins. The color of the jumper doesn't really matter. In this picture we can see the connections to port A. So starting at the left hand side and working our way towards the right hand side, the first wire is the yellow jumper, which goes from pin 1 on the variable resistor to the 3 volt pin on port A. The next pin on port A is a ground, and that goes to pin 3 on the variable resistor. Then we have port pin A2, which goes to pin 2 of the variable resistor. So these 3 pins are the ones that will let us control the brightness of the LEDs. And then lastly we have the orange jumper going from port pin A1 into pin 1 of button 1, and this is the one that lets us toggle the colors. This picture shows the connections to port C1 and for button 2. So we have the white jumper wire coming from port pin C1 and going into pin 1 of button 2, and pin 2 of button 2 goes to ground, which is on port E. And in this view you can also see the data pin from the light stick going to port E1 on port E. This picture shows the connections from the light stick. So starting on port B on the left, the red jumper wire goes from the 5 volt pin on port B into the 5 volt pin on the light stick. Next we have the green ground jumper, and that goes from the ground pin on port B into the ground pin on the light stick. And finally you can see the blue jumper wire, which goes to the data in pin on the light stick, and that goes to port pin E1 on the JackBord. This last picture shows the connections to button 1 and the variable resistor from the inside. And so basically on the left hand side you've got the ground wire going to pin 2 of button 1, and then the orange jumper goes from pin 1 of button 1 into port pin A1. And then for the variable resistor, which is the knob on the right hand side, the green wire on the left goes to ground, the middle wire carries the voltage from the variable resistor to port pin A2, and finally the yellow jumper on the right hand side, which is pin 1 of the pot and the 3 volt pin on the port A, is what provides the power to the variable resistor. To get the code for this project, visit JB.works in your web browser. At the search prompt, enter the TMT code shown below and press enter. Once you see the code on the screen, click the Copy Code button, and this puts the code into the clipboard. Then go to the prog page and paste the code into the area you're working in. Right, let's have a look at the code and see how it's different. So basically everything's pretty much the same until we get down to the flashing code. So right now, originally we had the section whereby we just turn the brightness of the LEDs up or down. So it goes down to dim or up to flash. What we've done here is added a new task called random lights. And that's the reason that the LEDs are flashing random colors when they're in flashing mode. So if I turn flashing mode off, they just stay at the same color, just like before. I start it again and it flashes random colors. So if we go down to the random lights task, the first thing we do is we create a new variable called LED number, which basically just goes from 1 to 10 and tells us which LED's color we're changing. And then we're going to repeat everything 10 times. So we're going to repeat all this 10 times because, of course, there are 10 LEDs. So the first thing we do is we generate a random color between 1 and 15, or a random number between 1 and 15, we store it in the color variable. And then we generate a random number between 1 and 10, which is then stored in the LED variable, or LED number variable. And so that determines at random, which of the LEDs is going to get the color. And then finally down here, we set the LED number, which is random of course, to the color, which again is random. And the result is, every time it goes through the flash cycle, it gets a completely new and random set of colors. So what's next? Well, that's really up to you. But things you could look at are changing the pattern of the LEDs, make them go in different combinations of color or combinations of on and off. Also looking at adding more light sticks so that you have a much bigger area that's got lights in it. There are all sorts of things. Have fun. For more information, visit JB.works.